For 4 days last year, the world almost ended. Not the whole world, just South Asia, just the two most densely populated countries on Earth, just 1.5 billion people living between two nuclear arsenals pointed at each other. You probably watched it on the news. You probably felt something in your chest that you couldn't name. And then you went to work, made breakfast, carried on. Because what else do you do when something that big is happening and you are too small to stop it? But here is what stayed with me. After it was over, after the missiles stopped and the ceasefire held, the President of the United States stood up and said something nobody expected. He said, "I stopped a nuclear war. I think it could have been a bad one, not almost, not close. A nuclear war." And I kept thinking, how did we get here? How did two countries, with everything to lose, get that close? Then I found something in an ancient Indian text that stopped me completely. Because ancient India had already answered that question 3,000 years ago, in the most precise language I have ever read, and both countries have ignored it ever since. Let me take you back to April the 22nd, 2025. Kashmir. A popular tourist spot. Families, couples, people just on holiday. 26 of them were killed by terrorists before the afternoon was over. 8 days later, India launched Operation Sindoor. Precision strikes deep inside Pakistan. Pakistan fired back. For 88 hours straight, missiles, drones, fighter jets, both sides. Now, here is the part the news didn't explain properly. India did not just hit terrorist camps. India hit targets right next to Pakistan's nuclear infrastructure. Nur Khan Air Base in Rawalpindi, the building next to it, manages Pakistan's entire nuclear arsenal. India hit near there. Kirana Hills, believed to hold Pakistan's underground nuclear storage. India hit near there too. Two nuclear nations, missiles in the air, and one side getting close to the other's nuclear facilities. Pakistan asked for a ceasefire after 88 hours, and then 3 months later, Pakistan's army chief stood at a dinner table in Florida. Not a war room, a dinner table, black tie, chandeliers. And he said this: "If we go down, we take half the world with us." The room went quiet. I went quiet too, because I had just read something that described this exact sentence, word for word, 3,000 years ago. The missile India used during those 88 hours, the one that hit Pakistani air bases so hard that Pakistan asked for a ceasefire, is called the BrahMos. You need to sit with that name for a second. BrahMos, named after two rivers, the Brahmaputra of ancient India and the Moskva of Russia. A modern weapon named after an ancient Indian river. And the ancient Indian text written about the civilization that lived along that river, the Mahabharata, contains the most accurate description of a nuclear weapon ever written before nuclear weapons existed. They called it the brahmastra. It needed specific sacred words to activate, like launch codes. It could only be stopped by another brahmastra. If both were used at the same time, nothing survives. And the text says nothing would grow for 12 years after it struck. 12 years, nothing growing, that is a nuclear winter, written in Sanskrit 3,000 years before Hiroshima. So let me say this clearly. India named its most powerful strike missile after the river of the civilization that described exactly this weapon and exactly these consequences. That is not a coincidence. That is a clue, hidden in a name, that almost nobody has noticed. But here is where the Mahabharata goes deeper than any news report ever will. It does not just describe the weapon, it describes the person who used it wrong and what happened to him. His name was Ashwatthama. His father had just been killed, not In a fair fight, through a lie, someone told Ashwatthama's father that his son was dead just to make him put down his weapons. His father believed it. He lowered his guard, and in that moment he was killed. Ashwatthama saw it happen, and something in him just broke. He had one weapon that could end everything. His father had taught him how to use it. But there was one thing his father never taught him: how to stop it. That night, broken, furious, alone, he fired it. The wise men came running from every direction. Arjuna, who had fired his own brahmastra back, pulled his back, because someone reached him. Because even in his anger, he could still hear something. Ashwatthama could not pull his back. And what the wise men said next, I want you to really hear this. They did not say, "You broke the rules." They looked at him and said, "You have destroyed yourself." Because the Mahabharata understood something that every nuclear strategist in the world has missed. The most dangerous person in a nuclear conflict is not the strongest one. It is the one who is broken, who has lost something they loved, who has the weapon in their hand and nobody left who can reach them. Ancient India left 3 warnings with the brahmastra. I want you to hear all 3, because all 3 are happening right now. The first warning: you cannot hold this weapon safely unless you have control of yourself first, not your enemy, yourself. A leader who has not dealt with his own pain should not be the one with his hand near the button. This is not spiritual advice. This is the first rule of the brahmastra, written 3,000 years ago. The second warning, committing to use it first, is ashwatthama's position. Pakistan's nuclear doctrine includes first use. The Mahabharata is very clear about what happens to the warrior who commits to firing first. He loses the ability to stop. He becomes ashwatthama, holding a weapon he cannot take back in a situation he cannot get out of. The third warning: the only thing that stops 2 brahmastra weapons is someone who stands between them. Not on either side. Between. In May 2025, that person was Donald Trump. Say what you want about him, but he stood between 2 nuclear weapons and made a phone call. And both sides stopped. Ancient India called it the most important role in any conflict, the one who arrives between the weapons, and asks both sides to answer to something bigger than their anger. 3 warnings, 3,000 years old, all 3 written for exactly this moment. I am not going to tell you who was right in May 2025, because that is not what this video is about. Both sides have their grief. Both sides have their version of Ashwatthama's father, the loss that made everything feel justified. I understand that. Anyone who has ever lost something they loved understands that. But ancient India wrote something down before either of these countries existed, something that matters more than who was right. It said, "The most dangerous moment is not when the powerful act, it is when the broken act, with the most powerful weapon on earth, believing they have nothing left to lose." Since 1998, both countries have been here 6 times, 6 crises, 6 moments where it could have gone the other way, and 6 times someone pulled back. 6 times someone heard something beyond their own grief. The Mahabharata says that is not weakness. That is the hardest thing a human being can do. To be in the worst moment of your life and choose to be something more than what your pain is telling you to be. Both countries have done this 6 times. The warning is still there, in the same ancient text. That gave its name to the river. That gave its name to the missile, and maybe, just maybe, it is time to read the rest of it. Subscribe to the Dharma Room. Ancient wisdom decoded for the modern mind.